3 and 4,
5 and 7.
or 5 and 7, and he's out of Heartland Health also. You have Deidre Young, she's a regional rep out of 6 and 8, out of Houston, Texas. You have Miss Amy Brissett, which is one of my mentors and a past chair of NCAB out of Worcester, Mass.
Yes.
Worcester.
And I'm not gonna mess up Joanne's last name, but Joanne is from Boston. She's a regional rep. Patterson, where's Miss Candy? And she is out of San Francisco. She's our member at large, and she's gonna be a member at large again without CAB. And the person that has spearheaded this particular program and the leader of this group is Mr. David Peary out of Miami. He's the regional rep, and that is 3 and 4.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, one of the things that we hope that you get out of this program, and we had to set as our goal, we want to explain the basics of trauma. We're going to set an outline, the principles and practice of trauma-informed approaches. That we'll be able to share strategies and tools for creating trauma-informed interactions in spaces. The question I always come up with is, why is trauma-informed care important for our consumers? One thing is to be able to create safe engagement spaces. It also fosters growth. It's a positive model for behaviors. It shares decision-making skills and informs participants through feedback. Now, one of the things that you'll find, and what Catherine had hit on earlier, as we go through this demonstration for you guys today, one of the most important things is to make sure you do self-care. If through some of the things that's going to be talked about today, if it brings back some memories or triggers some different things, please, you have Catherine here, you can see Catherine, and you have other members of the cabinet to be able to see. But if you just have to, you can get up and you can go outside and take a deep breath. And we have other things in place in order to help individuals as you go through this. Next, on our thing, I would like to pass it over.
Today, me and my co-presenter, we're going to talk about what is trauma, the learning objectives for this particular segment of this workshop. Excuse me, I'm kind of hoarse from yesterday. We will define trauma, discuss how to identify traumatic stress reactions, and explain the value of the support system. So, what is a trauma? It is a series of events or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, and emotional or spiritual well-being. So right now I'm going to talk about the 3 E's, the events, the experience, and the effects. So there can be an event like a earthquake where you have 2 individuals. One individual can come out shaken up and with injury. The other person during that time could go through this earthquake or this event with no harm to them. So, yeah. And so that's covering the 3 E's. I apologize again because my voice is like gone.
All right.
My name is Keith. How y'all doing this morning? Thank you. So we're going to be talking about possible traumatic events, which is loss, traumatic stress, betrayal, neglect, abuse, and community. So loss, like the loss of a dog. Some people love. I'm sorry. Some people love dogs. You know, they lose their dogs their dogs may die, and it might be a real loss to them. And it's an event. It could be a traumatic event to them. You know, chronic, like chronic stress. You know, yeah, I know how y'all drivers be in the little cars. You know, get out of the way, get over here. You know, what that dummy's doing. Stuff like that. You know, them are the type of things that, you know, people go through with chronic issues. You know, maybe some people have it and some don't. I know that when I'm on my bike, somebody get in my way, I would just, you know, go off sometime, you know, and I shouldn't be going off, but it's just the way it is most of the time. Also, neglect. I always felt neglect when it came down to my parents. You know, I felt like I was neglected because they was in their drug use, and we missed Christmas. You know, we missed Halloweens, and we missed shopping and stuff like that. You know, because that stuff takes away the life that a child should have. You know, and also, I mean, we gonna deal with betrayal. Betrayal, you know, I felt betrayed with that issue too, the same thing with my parents, with my father not being who he's supposed to be, not stepping up to the plate, you know, and issues like that, you know, which is, it still affects me today. You know, it affected me and it affected my son also. So also, we're gonna be dealing with abuse. Yes, abuse is one thing that I feel that, like when I'm out there volunteering or something, 'cause I'm a volunteer out in the Lions, I see all type of abuse going on, with the abuse of drugs or with the abuse of a man beating up their women, you know, with kids being hit real hard because they being kids out in the street. You know, I see them things, you know, and it ain't good. But it does happen. And also, the community, I have to put my glasses on. Community trauma, community trauma. Like in my neighborhood, I'm in a nice neighborhood. I know some people that's in a neighborhood that kids are getting killed. They getting beat up. They daughters are getting raped, and that's a community issue. You know, people need to like get together, but it doesn't happen. I'm from Chicago. I don't know about y'all. I know y'all heard about Chicago. We talking about the murder capital. It used to be some other state, but Chicago is actually the murder capital of the world right now. You know, they are the murder capital of the world. People are dying. People on their way to college, the day before they supposed to leave for college is dead. You know, and things like that. But I appreciate y'all letting me do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the Blackstone Rangers still in Chicago?
They trying to bring them back. They don't want the Madison and Plaza.
The impacts of trauma. Personal purpose, the views of others or the world, a sense of safety or fairness, a vision for the future, behaviors, aggression, self-harm, substance use, and self-destructive behaviors. Hypervigilance. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. So the key factors of recovery is normalizing symptoms. The HCH clinic or safe spaces like the resource room or some of the other resources that we have at our site or around the area are some of the keys to helping an individual recover from traumatic events. Talking with your therapist, gone to seek other professional help. Yeah. So right here is right here where you see these two individuals where they're locking up together and showing unity. It's like the fortitude where nothing can break through them. You know what? No kind of harm or danger can harm them. So this particular picture and the next one is a great example of what I was talking about. I like the HCH clinic in that waiting area is a safe space for individuals when they're dealing with a lot of things, because they can come there and, you know, and get whatever they need, whatever they're thinking.
Again, I'm gonna be talking about how I recovered from my trauma. And how I recovered is I started going to groups. You know, I got connected to this place called C4, which is a mental health place. I'm connected to Harvard Alliance. I'm in recovery. I have a 12-step program. I have a network of people that I use as a foundation to help me every day, because I have to have it, because I still sometimes think about the same things and they just come from nowhere. You know, but the main thing is that, you know, dealing with mental health, going to these groups and stuff that people have, like C4, going to Heart in the Lion, seeing my doctor and stuff. That's how I recovered from my trauma. You know, I got run over by a flatbed tow truck and my pedal was crushed. And right now, it's like that right now. I got my whole body in number pins. My lower body in number pins. So that's how I recover. I just keep the network of people. I stay connected to people. You know, healthcare, mental health. I never had mental health, but sometimes I feel like I need it. Because that is a real, you know, but that's how I recover. I use a network of people. I just, you know, use case management. You know, I might call you. I got phone numbers. I use a network of people, you know, that helps me recover. You know, and like I say, sometimes it could be actually really rough for me. But you know what? The main thing is staying in recovery. You know, and that's the main thing for me. And thank you again.
It's really spontaneous. It's not within our with our agenda here, but I can tell you about a very traumatic event that happened to me, and how I helped to recover, what support systems that I accessed. I had a very bizarre incident that happened to me about 10 years ago. It was a false arrest, where I lost all of my possessions and was wrongfully incarcerated for about 20 days. First time in my life I ever went to jail. I'd fallen a couple of months behind in my rent, and unbeknownst to me, the two fellows who were collecting rents from my landlord were City of Miami police officers. They were doing, they had a job off duty where they collected rents for various landlords within my neighborhood. And instead of taking me to court because I was 2 months behind on my rent, waited one Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. I went out to get some breakfast. I came back a half hour later at 10:30. My locks were changed on my door. Wow. And so I'm trying, you know, when something weird happens, you know, I mean, you put your key in a lock 1,000 times, it turns. This time it didn't turn, and so I'm kind of wondering what's going on here. You know, why is my key not turning? And then one of the guys who I pay my rent to drives up in his car, and he rolls down the window, and he motions me over. I go over to him, and he says, hey, look, he holds up this envelope. He says, your door was open. I came by to do a rental check, your door was open. I looked inside, and I saw a crack pipe, and I saw some drugs on your living room table. Okay, and he says, I got them right here in this envelope, and if you don't move out right now, I'm going to arrest you. I'm a City of Miami police officer. And I'm like, huh? Okay. You know, obviously the door was not open. I had 2 locks. I wasn't doing any drugs. Okay. All this was crazy. It was out of a movie. So I basically, I called 911 and got some new police officers there. Okay. By this point, he had already drove off and left. The new officers came. I told them what happened. They called him up. He came, actually delivered drugs to the apartment, okay, which is really weird. He told the new officers that I was homeless, that this was an abandoned apartment, and that he had caught me using drugs. So I went to jail for 20 days, which was an experience in and of itself. Meanwhile, they cleaned up my apartment, took everything out and threw it out in the trash. TV, personal pictures, photos, everything. All right, hugely traumatic event. To speed up the rest of the story, I went to internal affairs and eventually and told them what had happened, showed them a copy of my lease agreement that I actually had kept off-site. Internal affairs did an investigation. They substantiated my complaint. They eventually arrested the officers who arrested me. And it was a pretty weird thing. My face is actually on TV. They got my photo from Department of Motor Vehicles, from a DMV photo. And it was a pretty big deal in Miami for a couple of weeks or so. And we went through a criminal trial where the officers, they finally dropped the criminal thing against the officers, and I had a civil lawsuit against the city and the cops, which was eventually settled. But that was beyond the trauma. It was a traumatic event, and a seriously emotionally traumatic event for me to lose all my possessions, to be arrested, first and only time in my life I'd ever been in jail. And, to this very day, I have to say, when I see a police officer, I cringe, okay? It kind of like makes me look twice. And I take a deep breath and I have to walk past. So what helped me? Because there were some moments when I was seriously on the edge, okay? A few months after this happened, I was seriously walking on thin ice. I was really an emotional wreck. So what did I do? What supports did I use? I used the support of, this is how I actually got introduced to our clinic and to our homeless shelter, Camilla's house. I used their case management, their support services there. I relayed my story. Some folks actually saw me on TV, so they kind of knew what was going on. And so I have a lot of sympathy from them. But this is one thing that I encourage everybody to do, is when you have these traumatic events in your life, you're not alone, okay? You can't bear these whole burdens all by yourself. There are many different types of support services out there. So I encourage you to go and seek that type of support, because it's much of this, as Keith mentioned, things like abuse and things like, when other people are victimizing you, it's too much for you to carry by yourself. Don't be ashamed. Go out there and get support from other folks. And the second thing that happened was, as one of the slides here, a safe space was created. There was some safe space within the shelter that I'd gone to, because I was initially homeless. That's how I got introduced to the whole homelessness thing. And so there were some safe spaces that were actually created by the shelter that were protective and were nurturing spaces. So again, I encourage everyone, don't internalize it. Don't feel like you're alone, because you're not. So if anybody else would like to share of any incidents, if you feel comfortable, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael Alexander, and I'm from San Francisco, California, and I'm just so honored to be here tonight. I guess I'm just in a safe haven with all you all today, and everything's been so beautiful. And today I just had some tragedy. I just got bad news this morning that my dad passed. I think I've cried out now, but I'm just so glad I'm in a safe haven today. God, He knows where the place is. I've been in sobriety for like 8 or 9 years. I've been with I've been a few NA, with Tom Wardell, and I'm still, every day it's a struggle, but every day I can get up and serve someone else, and that just makes me feel good, and that takes that urge from me helping someone else and speaking on my tragedies and things I went through. And I've been married for 28 years, and in August, my wife, she passed with cancer, so she's been gone now. In August, it'll be 3 years. And I'm just rolling right along, but I have good support. And I just heard this man here, he spoke about his dad. I never had that experience where I didn't have love, because it was there. I was just blessed to have both parents, for all these years. And I'm just blessed to be here today, and God got me here. That's all I needed to say. I don't want to get too long with it. Thank you.
I think it often does help too to express these things, don't internalize them. I'd just like to ask a question, if anybody would like to volunteer. What does trauma mean to you?
Trouble.
What does trauma mean to you?
It means trouble. It could be from outside, or it could be trouble. It could be trouble that you caused for yourself by not having, by having negative thinking. I brought the trauma that I've had in my life. Most of it I created myself because of the fact that I was searching for something, not knowing what it was, and it was with me all the time. I grew up in the church, and I was taught right from wrong as a kid. I was raised by my grandmother, and my mother had an unfortunate accident when I was very young. My father, he was supposed to be a preacher, but I guess you call him a bootleg preacher, because he got in the wind, and I never saw him much. So my grandmother stepped in and took care of me, and she taught me her ways of hard working, being honest, of having a love and a fear for God. And and all I needed when I was out there in the jungle, which I chose after my marriage broke up, I decided to play the streets. And I played the streets, and the streets played me. And next thing you know, I had a drug habit, alcohol habit, and I always was a very hard worker, because my grandmother and my mother's brother, oldest brother, he instilled that in my heart, you understand, to work, don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, and be an honest person, and you'll be all right in life. And all of them did that, and they led by example. But then, when I got out there in that street, it was wine, women, and song, And I played the piccolos and played the street women. And you understand, next thing I know, I was like uptight and out of sight, even though I worked all my life as a salesman, selling appliances and so on and so forth, and I stayed pretty sharp and had a stable family life for a while. But then when I hit them streets, man, rigor mortis almost set in, because I got hooked up in the party lights and the Superfly and the crack pipe, you understand, and all of that stuff, and do it till you're satisfied, and all that kind of mess, and I got messed up. But anyway, through coming into become homeless and coming into the shelter, I was reborn. And I'm so glad about it. That trauma today, that's been 17 years ago. Today, I'm housed in a beautiful senior apartment. I'm off drug and alcohol for 16 years. You understand, I can see clearly now. The rain is gone. Thank you.
That's it. I'd like to focus on what we are doing. First, how you define it, what has happened, if you feel comfortable in sharing it, and to focus on how we've recovered. What support have we gone through? And I can see your support was from your family and from your...
And God.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Good morning. Trauma, to me, is something major that happens in your life, whether it's a self-choice or something that happens to you. You know, sometimes we don't always have control over the things that happen. So when I think of trauma, you know, it's something major that it's a stopping point in your life. It's almost like hitting a brick wall and then trying to function as normally as possible from that moment on. And so whether that's, to me, it kind of is like PTSD. And PTSD, you can get from other things other than, you know, PTSD, it's always referred to for military. And that's not the only cause of PTSD. PTSD you can get from a car accident, which is one of the things that happened to me. And I got traumatic brain injury from a major car accident that I should have never survived from. PTSD from the World Trade Center. I was a mile away and I was working with law enforcement. The smell of the burning and planes overhead, and I still get triggered from that. PTSD from being sexually assaulted. You know, I'm very blessed that, you know, I never had to spend a physical night on the street in a box, but I know that my brothers and sisters that are on the streets have suffered that. PTSD from being sexually harassed and intimidated just for having the body parts on my body every day of my life. PTSD from my friends and my brothers and my sisters that are LGBTQ that suffer from that injustice. Those are the things that I think of when I think of trauma. You know, the PTSD that's associated with that. And you just try your absolute best to try and function normally from that moment on. It's new steps, and it's almost like about to step on landmines, and you just never know where that next step, if it will be a trigger and it will explode, and you just never know. So you have to kind of traverse and have to maneuver your way through. And it's never having that comfortability before you hit that wall. And so whatever the cause of it, for that brick wall that was that trauma, you just never have that sense of security and stability and normalcy. And it's functioning as best and as normal as you can from that moment forward.
Thank you.
Would you mind sharing what some of the support that you may have received in your life, you know, or what's helping you to recover?
Sure. I think the first thing for me personally was spirituality, and whatever that means to you, whether it's religion or natural. For me, it was also holistic health and holistic medicine and holistic teachings. That was the core. That's what helped me stabilize and know that my authentic self wasn't different. You know, I was still me. And those things that happened to me didn't change my core. So that was the big thing, is knowing that your spirituality, your religion, your holistic, your authentic self, you're still you. You don't change. It's how you react to the things around you. And so for me, you know, that was the major foundation for me. And then having the support, because I don't have a lot of actual blood familial support. It was support from friends, whether that be long-term, like I only have one or two really hardcore, I can call them in the middle of the night. The rest is my community. It's my brothers and sisters that experience homelessness, that experience trauma, that my LGBTQ and alternative lifestyle families that give me my support. And then the groups that I am connected to through HCH, and where I find my absolute bliss, that recharges me is helping other people. And I think that that's why I've been really successful and have progressing at like lightning speed forward, is knowing that even if I can't help myself in this moment right now, if I can help someone else, if I can lessen their stress, their anxiety, their trauma, their pain at any point for any minimal part of time, I'm doing something great. And that's what gives me hope, that's what keeps me faith-filled, that's what keeps me moving forward. Even if I can't help myself, if I can help you, if I can help you, I've done my job. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to capitalize on that. You guys keep me sane, and I appreciate that. Does anybody else like to tell me what your definition of trauma and perhaps what support?
Morning. Well, basically, what I've heard so far is individual trauma, but for the providers that's in the room, I would like to bring up secondhand trauma. Because being a provider and working with the individuals that we work with each day and hearing the trauma that they go through, we get secondhand trauma just like you can get secondhand smoke. You know, and the input you have to understand as a provider, you know, you have to be able to have that self-care for yourself as a provider. One of the things that I try to exercise during the course of the day, because I'm a community health worker, whereas I work with the different individuals that I work with, so I don't take the trauma experience I've had from one client to another client. I normally take and put a 5-minute or a 10-minute space in between working with my clients. That way I can calm down, I can let the trauma from that one experience go away and then be able to handle the individual I'm working with on the page that they are that day and not bringing the page that I was on with the other person to them. And we have to be able to understand that you have the secondhand trauma also.
So anybody else? Okay, I'm coming with Scary here. We're talking about what does trauma mean to me, and also what support, how we've helped to recover from our trauma.
Okay, the trauma that I'm familiar with and most of my life, and had the opportunity to learn to understand it and how to work with it, is also called PSD, but it's post-traumatic slave syndrome. And it didn't happen during slavery, it happened afterwards. It happened during the Jim Crow, it happened during the brutality. And it happened when they turned the prisons into the new slave order. That kind of thing, visiting men that have been removed from our community and placed in prisons. So that's where we go to see them. They're not economically able to create and balance for their families. So we bring their children to prison. We bring their mothers, we bring their sisters. But when you go to a site where women are held, you see more women there supporting. But it's effective, and it causes issues like he went through. It causes issues where if you have a hoodie on, you could be singled out. It's a trauma that people don't want to face. It's a trauma that I think the only president who ever kind of addressed it was Clinton, when he apologized, because that was one thing that never happened. When there was the Japanese internment, they got retribution. They have never gave retribution. The story they tell is that how can they document who was a slave and who wasn't a slave? Well, in reality, that's true, but there are banks and there are companies that benefited from those particular incidents, so there is a list, there is a track. However, I'm living in a community where they're trying to gentrify, and all of us are familiar with those cities. And what happens is people get pushed deeper and deeper and further into desperation and to poor conditions. What we try to do is lift them up, but some of them are so far gone that they depend on a substance to support them, or they depend on whatever it is that releases that tension. Usually I don't speak to anyone else about this particular PDS syndrome other than people that I know that are familiar with it, but it's documented. And there's been a lot written about it. So as soon as I look up the lady's name, I will pass it on if you'd like to understand it, because the people you're dealing with in these clinics, a lot of them suffer from that. And it's shame, and it's guilt, and it's oppression, and it's economically, deprivation. What really happens is that a few make money, and that's usually the athletes. Those are usually the people that are trying to be more acclimated to the social order, instead of being themselves, instead of being able to be their authentic selves. These things come up. But I appreciate people, and I deal with people on a one-on-one base. So what's in my heart is to heal. And dealing with that particular trauma, raising my son, I made sure he didn't fall in that trap. I let him know that officer wants to get home as much as you want to do. So stick to just the basic concept. And I'm proud to say that my son is flourishing. He has a family, and they're all historically aware of who and what they are, and they appreciate that. And thank you for the time.
One thing I thought was very interesting is that most of the speakers talked about how trauma not only impacted them individually, but also impacted the folks around them. You know, I believe you mentioned 911. That was certainly how trauma impacted the community. Joseph also mentioned community impact. Sakari also mentioned a legacy, you know, that racism can have on the community. Would anybody else like to talk about how trauma impacts a community and possibly how we can possibly recover from that?
My name's Lee. I live in Los Angeles, and I work on Skid Row. I'm a nurse, and I worked in the emergency department before that. And I definitely realized, like, more and more as I go throughout the work, that the violence around me affects me a lot. And I think that, you know, a lot of us, and I really appreciate the generational trauma about that you just mentioned. And I think as humans, we are carrying a lot of sadness and anger. And I'm totally traumatized by the violence I see all the time. And sometimes I have to shake it off me. I get in my car and, was assaulted recently. It wasn't, wasn't a big deal. I got my jacket ripped, I got pushed, but I didn't get shot or killed, but it's still real, and I've been doing this work for 25 years, and I've seen a lot of people get hurt, even watching the news, just even, the way we interact with one another in the society, it's traumatic. It's hard. I mean, it breaks my heart. you know, so to hear people talking about that and seeing us all come together and discuss, you know, the issues that make our hearts heavy and make it difficult for us to, you know, interface as humans, that divide us. That's real, you know, trauma, that being a provider or being someone who accepts help takes a lot of humility on both sides, and how you get there when you're, you know, dealing with so much pain and strife, you know, and you know, the personal trauma you carry with you from, that I have carried with me from things that happened to me as a child, and then into my life to heal, and I also am in recovery. And, you know, from, you know, because drugs and alcohol are something that we use to cope, you know, like, yeah, I needed that. And so, you know, and I think, like, it's, you know, and then even having that burden of, like, the shame of being an addict, you know, like, everyone has that kind of shame, but I think, like, that's traumatic, you know, the stuff I did, the harm that we did put ourselves in. But to be able to, you know, bring that out is a way to recover from, you know, trauma. I don't know how to speak to that, but I do know that the violence that I experienced as a, you know, provider in the safe space of a hospital, and then coming out into the community is intense. And I mean, I don't know, as a woman, it's also, you know, this other person spoke to the danger of being a woman in society, you know, of being, you know, a person of color in society, of being, obviously I'm not a person of color, but that's not obvious, but I'm not, you know, but whatever, the violence, we all go through whatever the circumstance that happens. I think that sort of trauma is enough to acknowledge, and I'm really just happy to be here, and thank you for sharing, everyone. But that's really all I got, so thank you.
It's not obvious that you're not a person of color, because my father was actually close to your skin tone here, you know, so you never know. I have first cousin who's blonde hair and blue eye. You never know, okay? You never ever know. We're going to go to break in a couple of minutes. Okay, I just want to also mention, you mentioned secondary trauma. We're going to have a speaker is going to talk on that in a little while. We're just going to take just two more quick ones, and then we're going to go to break, okay? Two more.
I just wanted to say quickly that I think that a lot of our role as providers is to, and now I'm a social worker, and I have worked in this field for a long time, and I work in administration now, and so a lot of what I do now is think about how not to, now that I'm part of the system, how try not to perpetuate trauma as the system, because I think a lot of systems are traumatic, right? And we are, as healthcare providers, part of a system, healthcare system, that can be traumatic. I think a lot of folks don't engage in healthcare because the healthcare system, hospitals are scary places. Providers can be not very welcoming. And so a lot of what our work is to try to make the system not so scary and not traumatic. And so we accompany people and we try to make that process less traumatic. So a lot of this conference has been about that too, so I've appreciated that.
Okay, last one. Joanne, you can be the keynote before we go to break.
Okay, so I'm gonna have 2 minutes. I didn't do that to me. Remember yesterday they gave me 30 seconds? I'm like, what's going on? Oh, okay, cool. All right. So anyway, I just want to touch what this lady was saying about how we do take things home with us. And the other scary part about it is that she's watching, she somehow managed to say that she got beat up, they only pulled her jacket off, and that was okay. The thing is that we become so used to these things happening that our brains anymore, you know, we actually think, we're becoming to believe that certain things are okay and they're not okay. But our brains are telling us that they're okay, And that's scary in itself. And you know, I am going to be sharing up there at some given time after one of these breaks. So I don't really need to be still talking, but I had to just say that because you're so cute. And, I said what I had to say, and I'm done.
You throw it at anyone who appears to be having a good time. So we're going to go off. We value your question. Hold it, because we got plenty of time left. Okay, we're going to take a short...
Hi, my name is Deidre Young.
Good morning.
And my trusty sidekick right here is Miss Amy. I'm going to be talking about trauma-informed care and trauma-informed approaches. The first thing we're going to talk about is what is trauma-informed care? Now, trauma-informed approaches. Trauma-informed approaches are based on a framework that involves understanding, recognizing, and responding to the effects of trauma. And acknowledging the role and widespread impact of trauma in people's lives. We recognizing the signs and symptoms of trauma. And acknowledging, I want to speak a little bit about acknowledging the role on the widespread impact of trauma in people's lives, because as we all just heard, there's all types of trauma in people's world. So how do we go to try to assist in making that better? And with the trauma-informed approaches, recognizing the signs and symptoms of trauma. You ever go into a doctor's office and you have had a traumatic experience? I had a situation where I've been abused. I've had traumatic experiences in my life, and I went to the doctor a couple of weeks ago, and the doctor was 3 hours late for my appointment. I sat in his office in my room for about an hour and a half. Of course, I'm always bringing my electronics with me, and I was watching a movie. And I was getting really, really upset because my appointment was at 9 o'clock. And you had to get there early, so I got there at 8 to fill out all my paperwork and everything. You know, for me, a traumatic experience is just going to the doctor. Because I've had bad experiences in the past with them. So, but you know, with the support that I've gotten from my new doctor, he was able to get me to go to see this doctor to get care that I needed. But at the time when the doctor finally came to my room, I was really upset. I was so upset that I was shaking because I was like, why did you make me wait so long? I don't want to be here. And his thing was, he didn't acknowledge that he acknowledged verbally that I looked upset. Because when I get upset, tears start running down my face. You know, I'm shaking a little bit. And he just started going into the visit. And then, you know, he looked at me because I wasn't really responding the way, you know, a patient would respond to the doctor. Because I'm already dealing with what I was dealing with. And he just stopped. He looked at me and, come here, you know, and just gave me a hug. I didn't want to hug this man that I had never met that had me waiting for 3 hours to see him.
No, you didn't.
You know, I thought that was kind of inappropriate, but it was my situation, and I was like, okay, learning about this trauma-informed care was beneficial for me because I was like, I could tell he had not gone through the training. And I wanted to teach him what I had already learned. I'm prepared for this. Okay. So what I'm going to do today is just go over a few things about the approach. And like I said, recognizing the signs and symptoms of trauma is a major thing because when you go into the doctors or the clinicians going to see their patients, and sometimes they don't recognize it. And so they just go on with the traditional way of what they do. So what I'd like to talk about now is integrating the knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices. There are ways that you can avoid re-traumatization, but also understanding potential paths for recovery and empowering personal choices. Individualizing care and approaches to fit each person's need, because everybody's different. What works for me might not be the same for you. It might not be the same for you. So, the trauma-informed differences, the traditional perspectives, changing behaviors and personal defects, difficult behaviors and are disruptive and maladaptive, and punitive approaches. Now those are the trauma-informed differences. The trauma-informed perspectives. Challenging behaviors are ways of coping, and difficult behaviors may be an automatic stress response and strength-based. Those are the perspectives of trauma-informed approaches. And I missed something.
That's okay.
Okay. Now, you ever go to I would say the doctor or a therapist or a session where the first thing they say is, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, well, wow. I mean, I had some issues, but I didn't think something was wrong with me. I got a couple situations I want to talk about, but what's wrong with me? I'm like, okay, that was the traditional, or used to be the way that I have had visits start off. I'm looking at, when I go into a visit, I want to see that you are paying attention to me. You're looking me in my eyes. There's a trust factor there. We also have, the new approach is not what's wrong with you, but what has happened to you. To me, that's more of a compassionate way of looking at it. I'm not looking at you like you're wrong. I want to look at you as if something has happened, and I would like to know about it in order to better serve the individual. And how do you understand the problem to how you understand the person? There's a really big difference when you walk into an office and the doctor's talking to you, but all he wants to know about is your problem. And the problem is, I need you to know about me. So, with that, I'm going to go on to the next one, which is trauma-informed differences.
You doing that?
You did that one already?
Right.
Am I done?
You're
Oh my goodness, you guys, thank y'all so much for being patient with me. I do appreciate this. I'm going to pass this on now to Amy. So she can give you guys so much more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Deidre. So my name is Amy Grissett. I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts, where I work at a community health center. Very involved with the work of the council. So thanks for coming. So these are the components of trauma-informed approaches: empowerment, peer support, safety, choice, collaboration and mutuality, trust and transparency. And I'm just going to focus on a couple of them. Empowerment. So really it's meeting people where they're at, honoring what people's strengths are and building on that. You want to make sure that you're listening to people. Just like Deidre said, you don't want to go into a doctor's office and have someone say, "What's wrong with you?" What kind of thing is that to say to somebody? Do other people have examples of what empowerment means to them? You can just shout them out.
What brings you into that?
What brings you into that?
If someone said that, that would put me in the driver's seat of the conversation.
Right.
Instead of feeling like I'm being judged.
Exactly.
Something's wrong.
So being non-judgmental.
Right.
Having empathy for people.
Right.
opening yourself up to listen. Not just, you know, that kind of listening. Really listen to people.
Right.
Yeah, eye contact.
Being able to use your voice and be heard.
That's right, exactly.
I think my therapist always says to me, "How can I help you today?" Like, what's up?
Yeah.
And I always say, "Well, here's da 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 da," and then, you know, she gives me my own control over my own life.
Exactly.
Like so, and I don't like anyone to control me anyway. This I don't feel, it doesn't seem fair, right to me. So she allows me to make my own decisions. And she'll curb me a little if she sees me going left to, because I have a tendency to go that way. So, shut up you. So, anyway, so it's a good thing that, you know, I'm grateful to have this therapist, but, you know.
Right, but that's a good point, Joanne, kind of guiding you. That's what she's there for, to
guide
guide
me,
you
not to tell me
through
what to
your
do.
healing, right?
Exactly.
And to be there for you if you need somebody,
Right,
right? And be
Absolutely.
non-judgmental.
that's right.
That's not what, you know, that's not what she's
No,
there
because
for.
we already feel like shit, you know what I mean? Most of
Exactly.
us. You know, we already feel bad enough. We don't need anybody else to make us feel worse,
Exactly.
like she did.
My doctor is funny because we always set some goals for me. So they always ask me like, hey, have you made it to your goals this month? So I really like it where you were saying that I don't have that judgment. I'm judging myself if I made the goals or not. So
Right.
it's me telling them, saying, yes, I made them. No, I didn't, but this is what we can work on now. And
Exactly.
then they have resources as well.
And that provider not making you feel bad that you haven't met those goals yet, right?
No,
Exactly.
they're always with the encouragement of like, hey, what can we do on our side to help you achieve those? Do you need to come to the clinic more? Do you need to do some extra activities to meet those? So I've met 2 out of 15 in the last 3 months, being so busy and stuff like that. So I mean, they've really gotten on to me and they're like, no, you got to come to the clinic. So that's what I've been doing. I've been finally getting that actual goal done. I'm making it to the clinic now.
And sometimes we, you know, we step back, but that's what they're there for, to encourage us and to keep us going forward, right?
It's okay.
So I'm gonna talk a little bit about collaborations, and it's right along with that, working together. You know, you want that team of providers, whether it's mental health providers, nurses, doctors, whatever it is, working as a team to help you, and you having a voice in your healthcare or, you know, your housing choices or whatever it might be, but you being part of that decision making is crucial. It makes you feel whole. It validates you as a person, right? And I feel like we're all experts. Anybody that's been through homelessness, we're experts. And our voices and our opinions matter.
Right.
And people need to know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any other, yes, Joseph?
To kind of piggyback on what you were saying as a provider.
Right.
You know, we as providers, we have tendency to think that we know exactly what the client needs in order to be successful. But what we have to remember is that we might have been with the client and we came up with some decisions and some goals last week because they was at that point in their life last week. And then different things can happen during the course of the week when they come back and see us today. We have to make sure that we're not on that page that we was last week. We need to be on that page that they are today. So we can start with it from today. And the other thing is that as we listen to the conversation that our clients make, it's called reflective listening. You should ask the question and tell them what you are hearing. Because it's just like the social work where you have 10 people standing up and you tell the first person something, and to see what the person that's number 10, if he gets the same thing that was started in the beginning. So you want to make sure you're on the same page with them and make sure you're hearing what that individual is trying to express.
That's a good example, because I can remember, you guys all remember where someone will say a word and you're supposed to add to that and the next person adds to it, and by the time you get to the end, right, it looks very different than what you expected it to look like, so. All right.
Amy, question.
there's a question in the back or a comment?
Just as a behavioral health provider, I always ask permission to talk to someone.
Right,
about
that's
certain
great.
things, because you may not be in the mood to talk about that when you're there for your blood pressure or something. You may not want to talk about substance use or tobacco use, so I always ask permission to talk to them about it. And if they say no, they say
Good
no,
point.
and we'll get it next time maybe. So I think that is empowering to patients.
Good point.
Absolutely.
I'm also a provider, and I just want to kind of piggyback on what he said. I think it's important that when you are working with somebody and trying to come up with a treatment plan or a plan going forward, that the person that you are working with is more involved in their goal setting than you are. Just like how you said, we might think we know what, decisions or paths somebody should be taking in order to move forward. However, that is not necessarily what's best for the person you're working with. You always need to meet the person where they are and make sure they have a stake in their own recovery and journey forward. Otherwise, you're just always going to have resistance. And there needs to be some type of ownership.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So now we're going to move on to some skills that are important to have. Communication skills. Joseph, several people have touched on active patient listening, being empathetic, so we talked a little bit about this. Emotional intelligence, group participation and facilitation, conflict resolution and de-escalation, and cultural humility. So with communication, I think it's important for you to pay attention. We said this before about the tone of your voice when you're talking, about your facial expressions, and body language. People are going to get turned off very quickly if you have your arms on your hips, or you're looking away, or you're making some weird expression with your face, or your tone is really loud. That turns people off. You know what I mean? So you want to really pay attention to those and making sure those kinds of things can trigger people as well. How does that feel, to all of you, the audience, and be careful that you're not losing your audience by using those odd facial expressions and body language and tones of voice. So you can lose your audience or very quickly that way. And everyone, deserves respect. Giving space for people to share, be upset if they need to be, knowing that they have a safe space to do that. I think it's really important, again, to be non-judgmental. We don't know what's going on in people's lives at the moment. It's not for us to say. We're there to help. We're there to listen. We're there to nurture and encourage. And of course, you got to step in when things get out of control. You know what I mean? Happiness. People are not. Those are valid feelings that everybody has, and I have no right to judge your feelings, or it's not up to me. Those are your feelings, and you own them. And so one of the things I was thinking about when I was talking about this, people in our society are not taught to talk about their feelings. And I think tell me if I'm wrong, but I think especially with men, right? Men from a very young age are taught, don't cry,
Right.
toughen up,
Right.
get over it.
Take it like a man.
Take it like a man, exactly. Other things that you guys have heard?
Suck it up.
Suck it up, that's another good one. I can remember my dad saying that to my brother, just suck it up. You're a man, and I remember sitting at the dinner table with my dad, and my dad loved spicy food, and he would always, he would get a hot pepper, and he would have us taste it. He would want us to taste that, and we didn't want to, and he was like, come on, you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it, And, you just don't do those kinds of things to a kid, right? So even that was a little traumatic for us,
Yeah, absolutely.
He could handle the heat, but I was a child. I didn't want to swallow that hot pepper.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yes, David?
if I can say, I think this is a very important slide for, that kind of sums up our whole presentation here, creating safe spaces for consumer-led spaces, that is. Because, consumer-led spaces, like for instance, CAB meetings, you can have instances in which a person's trying to express, all right, and then we too much do stuff on the left side there, okay? We're non-responsive to the needs, we'll dismiss and trivialize their experience, tell them that they're wrong, okay? And tell them, hey, calm down, you're too emotional, calm down. The worst thing you can tell somebody who's being, expressive is to calm down. What's the first thing that they do? They escalate, okay? They're throwing fuel on the fire.
I'm doing
it. Somebody to calm down. And I've also found this in a gender thing as well, male, female.
Yeah.
When a man tells a woman to calm down, that's the worst possible thing.
God, don't.
That's the one thing you can say is going to guarantee escalation. So these are all the things, when we create these consumer-led spaces, not to do.
Yeah.
Okay? And don't dismiss, you have to validate people. Okay? So when you're looking at that other side there, okay, these are extremely important, so if everyone could please take a moment to look at these. This really sums up our whole
Yeah, and
presentation.
it's really about creating a safe space where people's feelings are validated and are important. And sometimes that's hard, right? Sometimes it's not easy. Things are gonna go wrong. Things will happen. It's about how you handle that at the moment, right? Comments, Paul?
Yeah, hi, my name's Paul. I was looking at the help people identify and communicate needs. And when I look at that bullet point, it really talks about strength-based assessments. And if you are familiar about strength-based assessments, it really talks about identifying with the individual on their strengths. Because we can always look at the problem, right? But we need to figure out how to not only look at the problem, but figure out that the individual has some strengths, and we build on those strengths and we just start moving forward, right? Because if we go into always looking at the problem, we're not looking at the solution, right? So we're always trying to find it or look at these problems and we get overwhelmed. But it's important that, again, where it says just to help people identify and communicate their part, and when we can identify that, it allows that individual to become part of their process. And they start to enjoy, they start to feel a feeling of hope and wellness, and it's just important. And again, I see the other bullet point that talks about active listening. Right? For me, as a service provider and a case manager, it's important for me to, I guess the best tool that I have is to just listen. And just listen, and when I'm listening, I can go ahead and repeat what has been said, just to make sure that we're on the same page. Right. Because I don't want to assume that they may be telling me something different than what they're actually telling me. So it's really important to, the active listening.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, sir.
Yes, when I would go to my CAB meetings and we would have issues and we would put everything out on the table and, and you would sit there and listen to what's been said, and some things could trigger you. And then when I would go see my doctor, I would, come in my appointment, and then I would just unload with my doctor.
Yeah.
And then at the end, when I unload, and then it's almost time for me my visit is over, I would always ask her, is there anything, do you like to speak to me about it? Do you have any issues? Because people don't ask the doctors sometimes about their issues. And it just kind of like blew her mind.
You sure did.
And she was just so humble that I asked her about if she had anything that she would like to speak on.
That's really great. I love that.
I think Amy's not talking about that at the moment. Secondary trauma is very real. The doctor gets trauma based upon other people's trauma.
I have a lady in the back.
Okay.
No, the one in the blue.
The one that's
Oh,
raising
I'm
her
sorry.
hand.
She's
There you
the
go.
one.
Sandra.
I apologize. And Dina had her hand up too.
Yeah.
Yes, and then.
And then-
I was just going through some pictures and I found a kind of a quote, and I hope it's okay for me to share.
Yes, please.
No,
And I just realized about this trauma group that I guess I'm gonna have a group of counselors. I didn't realize I had trauma. I learned a lot at this conference. Anyways, it says, anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we're not alone. Fred Rogers.
That's beautiful, thank
Is there a
you.
way to send that to someone so that that can be distributed? Is there a way for that?
Yeah, send it to Kathy.
If you send it to me. Kathy can do it.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Go ahead.
This is just something that I learned a long time ago. For me, it's better to ask permission than it is to ask for forgiveness. And so with sharing stories that are very personable, and it's coming from a very vulnerable place, and I'm a part of the Speakers Bureau, always ask for permission. Like if your story is really important to me, I want to ask you for permission, like, hey, that really touched me. Is it okay if I share it with other people? Because just because you share it with me does not give me authority to share it with someone else.
That's a very good point.
And so, it's better to ask a question. There's usually, I'll say there's never a stupid question. Occasionally there are. And I take that from my LGBTQ sisters and brothers, like, there are certain things, yes, you should never ask. There are certain things you should never ask. But, asking if you can share someone's personal, vulnerable moment that they've taken the opportunity to share with you, and just because it's been shared at large gatherings does not mean that you can share that with other people, because this right here is a safe space.
We started late.
So always
and
ask for permission
yeah,
to
we got a
share
lot of
someone
slides to
else's
go
story.
through on here.
I just wanted to.
Thank you so much for adding that. Were there other
Taking a
questions or
10-minute break.
comments? Okay.
Yeah, I've got one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
No,
like this.
15,
I
it took
agree with
forever.
it wholeheartedly. My
10,
name's Jonathan
give them 10
Houston.
minutes time.
I work,
We have a lot of slides.
Harris Health brought me here, but I'm
Yeah.
staying at a homeless mission. I run their halfway house. We have people come in, drugs and alcohol, all walks, okay, self-explanatory, okay? And we try our best to provide everything on the right. Okay, now when they bring the street in and start affecting the safety of others, I'm going back to the left.
That's when you have to
And
step
you're
in.
gonna take out, and you're gonna take your step, maybe you need to go back out there if you can't follow a few simple rules, and you can't make up the decision, you have, right out of the NA Texas, the line, I love it, I love it, I love it, I'll keep repeating it the day I die. You cannot save your face and your ass at the same time. You need to pick one.
Wait, I don't get it. I need an explanation.
And I don't care who you were out there on that street, you're in here now. And you gonna mind somebody. Or you gonna have all the freedom you want right out there to pick out of any dumpster to eat from. Or you can stay in here and have a hot shower in a safe place to stay. It's a give and take. I'll give you every opportunity.
That's right.
And with that opportunity, it might be written in rope, so you're allowed to hang yourself with it too. Sometimes it's just, and when a doctor asks me what's wrong with me, I give up. What's wrong with me?
There you go. That's a good response.
Isn't that why you're here?
Exactly.
I don't know.
There you
I'm
go.
funny like that.
That's great, that's great. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next slide, David, thank you. Avoiding re-traumatization. So we talked a little bit about this, it's huge. And I just wanna say that we could take each of these bullet points and spend an hour or more, right, Matt? On each of these. So, I apologize that we're going through this, even though it's 4 hours, it's a lot of information to cover. And know that all of these slides are gonna be available on your app, and if you go to the website, so you'll have access to all this material as well. So people have all kinds of trauma, and we don't necessarily know what that is, right? I don't know how you're feeling today. We had no idea, Michael, what happened to you. And thank you for sharing that again, because it has to be a really tough time for you. And we don't know what people's triggers are. I don't even know what my own triggers are sometimes, you know? So how am I gonna know what your triggers are? And it's not up to me to figure that out, you know? I think especially in a cab situation, you really need to get to know your cab members. Now the cab that I'm on, I've been on for about 14 years, and there is one other cab member that's been on there as long as I have. But then there's been a lot of cab members kind of moving in and out, very, you know, we're having to recruit and all of that. So it's tough sometimes, you know, you want to keep the momentum going, you want to keep, so it's hard to take that time sometimes to get to know that person and their story, and sometimes they're not even ready to share that with you. Right. But I think it's really important to continue to learn and ask questions and be very sensitive to people. We don't want to re-traumatize people, and we hope we're not doing that for you guys today. What's de-escalation? I mean, what does that mean to folks out there, de-escalation? Yes.
Attempting in a very friendly way to calm someone down, to make sure that things don't explode.
Again, meeting people where they're at, right? Trying to understand where they're coming from. Understanding that you're there to help.
It's the way you speak too, you know, it's humanizing the situation. I mean, I have escalated numerous things, and I've learned now that my mouth can get in a lot of trouble, so I have learned to stop and think before I speak. I don't always do that, I need to say, and most people that know me know that, but I usually say the truth, but I try to say it in a kind of a comical way, and it's kind of how I do my story and other things. But you have to have a way of seeing somebody, meeting them where they're at, and loving them, showing them love, and speaking really soft and gently. And I've learned how to do that. I don't know how because I'm such a crazy woman. I don't know how I've learned that, but I actually have. So it's a good thing. That's one of the ways that I have done. The way I respond.
Yes, Justin.
As a first responder, when we have issues at our clinic, one of the things that I try to do is to take an individual to another space. Because the only thing that individual probably needs is someone to be able to listen to what they have to say. And I find that by having them, the two people in that same space together, it's like throwing gasoline on fire.
Especially like if it's in an open waiting area and you have a lot of people around, you don't want to embarrass that person. You know, they're going through whatever they're going through.
You know, it's going through, so when you take them to a separate space, it gives them a chance to breathe.
Yes, and to calm down. And you use those skills. Yeah.
You can use your skills to work with that individual in order to solve that problem.
Right. David?
Just from a personal perspective, you know, I was involved in all these slides and all these principles and everything, but I can tell you that when it comes to certain interactions, it's extremely difficult for me on a personal level to apply some of these principles. Like for instance, when dealing with a family member or dealing with a loved one, a spouse or something like that, I know all the things I'm supposed to do, but for instance, you know, I'm dealing with my ex-wife, I know I'm right, okay, I know I'm right, okay, and she knows she's wrong, and you know, I'm gonna make sure she knows she's wrong, all right? You know, and so I'm just saying that I see all these things here, and I'm trying in my mind to say, yeah, I do all of these things because I learned, I know it. But I'm just saying, when it comes to certain personal relationships that you might have with a parent, a child, a spouse, it's very difficult to get beyond that. As you know, another way you were saying, you know, you have a choice of saving your face or saving your ass. You know, I would say a choice of of either being happy or being right.
Yeah.
Okay, the
Yeah.
ego says I have to be right. You don't have to be
Exactly.
right, but you want to be happy.
Yeah, okay.
Any other ideas of de-escalation personally or through your agency?
Yeah, and I sort of like where they ended with being right or being dead, because one of my mentors, he often cautioned me about being dead right, because dead is dead. The situation that I'm actually thinking about is one that we had at our Client Advisory Council. We recently voted in 3 new members, but that was some reluctance on the part of one of the people. But I thought I was gifted a favorable situation when the question was asked, are we going to consider all 3 of them together to make a group vote or individually? So I kept my mouth shut. And somebody made a motion because we were trying to get out of the room to do it.